Okay, so we're here for our very, very fun data quality meeting this year. Just to get started, Andrea, for those of you just coming on, Andrea is taking roll for us. So please make sure as you're logged in that you put your full name and your LEA so that we can keep track. Also, if you're just listening in and not watching, then we'll need you to send an email or speak up. Right? Well, I guess you can't really because we have them all muted, huh?
Tell them to chat if they have a question.
But if they're on the phone, they can't chat if they're just listening. So
They can
email it into us if you're just listening, please, so that we can make sure we get everyone accounted for. I know you guys have lots of things planned for this weekend, and it's a busy week. So we're going to get started. There may end up being times through this where there's going to be quite a few questions or some discussion items. So the first thing we're going to chat about today is what happened with last year's data. So this year, Jeff ran and did our performance information for us as a state to have, but we actually were not required to report it in our December federal report to OCDE. So we did not have to turn that in. We turned in concentration information, but we did not turn in all of our FAUPLs last year. So they gave us this year to use that data and to come up with our baseline information in our reports, which Jeff has created. And we have the state report in the OneDrive. So the files that we're going over today and the things that we're discussing today, you'll see in the OneDrive. There is a folder. It is the very first folder in the list in the OneDrive. And it says Perkins 5 resources or Perkins 5. I can't remember the exact name, but it's at the very top. And so inside of there, you'll see a folder for data quality meetings. And in there is the secondary information. And you'll see the report there, along with some of the other things that we're going to go over today. Jeff has created these files for the state and for each of you by pathway, by LEA and by LEA pathway, so that you can see that information.
They'll be move it later.
Say that.
They will be uploaded to move it just a little bit later.
Okay. So we're going to start talking about Perkins 5. Perkins 5 concentrator, participant, and completer definition. So as we go into Perkins 5, a participant always is the same as it has been in previous years. So participants are any student who takes a, so that's going to be a course with a 30 or higher core code. So just remember, as you're using core codes for your classes, that it is important because that's where we get the information from the warehouse from Utrex. It's submitted to Utrex through your SIS systems and how you have students enrolled. So the core code ties to Perkins as well as to your state funding. So think of it as filling dual purposes. That core code is very important. Concentrator information is by pathway. So you have the most recent copy of those pathway documents. Jonathan released those and has those up on the OneDrive. So concentrators are defined by Perkins as 2 courses in a single program of study. As a state, we've identified which of those courses count as concentrator courses. So in that pathway, not every single course will count, because when Jeff ran the baseline information for concentrator based off of 2 courses alone, we got a huge number, right, yeah. Jeff? It was like 90-some% of students in the state were concentrators because of the 1.0 credit for CTE for graduation. So in order to adjust or account for that, we have to identify which courses indicate that a student is actually a concentrator in a specific pathway. Andrew, will you let us know if there's any questions? Okay. Okay, and you're tracking too. Perfect. All right, and then the completer information is obviously determined by each program of study or pathway. Some of our pathways have different requirements, and so, but we are still going toward a 3-credit culmination of courses, but the sequencing also matters because of that concentrator definition and the way we're using concentrators. So, in Perkins 5, we've identified, and this is in the state plan, but we want to make sure and go over all of it with you guys. So we have 4 sort of academic indicators for secondary with Perkins 5. We have the graduation rate, and that is the same rate that we've used in the past. Is that right, Jeff?
Yes.
The grad rate?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's the same definition. Numerator is 12th grade CT concentrators divided by 12th grade CT concentrator graduates. So you've got that definition. It's been the same. So we've set that number, and you'll notice it's lower than what we have been setting it at in the past. And that is because these core academic indicators are tied to ESSA. So our state has set some ESSA goals for graduation rates. And as part of Perkins 5, we have aligned with those ESSA indicators where possible. So that grad rate is aligned with the ESSA grad rate. So we maintain that and at the same rate of increase each year that we have set that in ESSA. So then we have our reading language arts. So reading language arts, mathematics, and science are all 10th grade assessments. So this should help a little bit with the question of how do I impact that number? So that number is based off of a 10th grade assessment now, not 9th grade. And the other thing that's different in Perkins 5 is concentrators are not reported only as graduates. In the past, we only reported them in the 12th grade. Currently, what happens under Perkins 5 is that concentrators will be identified as they become concentrators. So you may have a 9th grade concentrator who has not taken the 10th grade assessment. In 10th grade, that student will then take their assessment. So in the first year, they may be a concentrator and be reported under a concentrator number, but they would not be reported in the assessment number. Once they take the 10th grade assessment, they would then be reported in both categories. And it's a year glance. So we look at them annually. So in year 1, so current year, anyone who is a concentrator by definition of our pathways will then be reported as a concentrator in head count. Then they fall into, do we look at them for graduation? No, not if they're in 9th grade, not if they're in 10th grade, not if they're in 11th grade, right? They have to have graduated. So we do look at them for mathematics, language arts, and science if they've taken those assessments. So the key is not necessarily their grade level, it's the assessment.
Right, if they've taken it.
If they've taken it. And so we need to make sure that the students are, taking those assessments, but then also know that when you get your results, you now have the ability to impact further achievement. You'll get those numbers earlier for concentrators if they're concentrating earlier. And you'll also be able to implement some programs into the middle grades and also potentially into 9th and early 10th grade to help impact those numbers for academic achievement. You have a little more opportunity to do some things in Perkins that way now. So it's all by concentrator, 10th grade concentrators divided by 10th grade concentrators who took the assessments. And that is the same for language arts, math, and science, right? There's no adjustments, Jeff.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to talk to them a little bit about how we set the baselines?
Yeah, what we did was you can get into the data gateway and actually find the reports for each of these academic proficiency indicators. And so what I did was filter it by 10th grade for 16, 17, 18. I can't remember how I got it for 19. Maybe someone in assessment gave me a worksheet or something. Anyway, we took the 4-year average of each of them, and then that became our baseline for each of those. If you look at the charts that Wendy has up there, so the ones in the green are going to be our baseline for 2020. The ones above it are the statewide indicators, but they're the students tested. It takes all exams into account, 3rd grade through 10th grade. So we didn't think that was applicable for us.
Okay. Any questions on those core academic indicators? All right, the next one, hopefully you guys can see that all right. There are the rest of our CTE indicators. So you have secondary placement. Secondary placement number is the same. We look at that with 12th grade, right? We've not made any changes, Jeff, to the placement.
Placement is the same, with the addition of a couple extra categories. So we have Peace Corps and then service organizations.
Yes. We will have a list. I think we have a list of all those service organizations, don't we?
We do, and I think it actually in the list that I send out of concentrators, even last year I had those 2 categories added, and it lists the organizations in the header above it. So we'll look for those to be filled out as well.
Okay. So that really hasn't changed. That'll be reported as students graduate, they complete. We also have the non-traditional program enrollment, and those are concentrators, not participants. It's been participation in the past,
and
right?
Completers.
And completers. Do you want to say anything else about that?
Just the participant non-trad was pretty useless, really, because it's hard to define a student as non-trad in a single course, right?
So we've identified that by pathway.
Pathway concentrator.
Concentrator. So as a student concentrates within a pathway, that pathway will be identified for non-traditional, either male or female. Don't forget that non-traditional in CTE is only related to female dominant or male dominant career fields. So those are the only areas where that number is impacted. And we have that, we can release. Do we have a crosswalk set up? We could release it, right? Yeah, so we can release that for you to look at, and you'll be able to see it, what those are as you're looking at your non-trad numbers. The other thing is we move into now 3 different program quality indicators. So the first program quality indicator is participated in work-based learning. So this is grades, so students in grades 9 through 12 who are concentrators and work-based learning, who have had work-based learning experiences. That is the numerator. The denominator is all CTE concentrators, grades 9 through 12. So in some ways, right, your 9th grade students probably haven't had a work-based learning experience. As they move into 12th grade is when, and 11th grade is when they have more of those work-based learning experiences. Those work-based learning courses currently consist of internship and apprenticeship under this definition. So only, and as you know, or you should know by now, we're working on a change to work-based learning to emphasize more of the internship and apprenticeship programs that are available. So I know we talked about that at consortium meeting, and you'll hear a little bit about it at director's meeting tomorrow. But just to be clear, we're only looking at concentrators for that definition. Then we have program quality, secondary completion. So that's secondary students completing a pathway. The interesting thing about this is we also will count students at the post-secondary level if they complete a post-secondary program. So in this indicator, you may have some students that are counting for a secondary indicator and a post-secondary indicator. Doesn't necessarily impact what you do, but the number does potentially impact the post-secondary partners if they're completing a post-secondary program. So as you guys have created in your region some alignments with post-secondary partners, you may have students that are completing a certificate or a 2-year program at a post-secondary partner that we should also be counting in this indicator for you, as well as their completion indicator. So again, we are looking at concentrators. So completion, so we have our 9th grade CTE completers divided by our 9th grade CTE concentrators. So the interesting thing I wanted you to look at with that is look at our baseline information. We're only at 23.5%. So right now what that means is of all of our CTE concentrators, not participants, but concentrators, kids who have identified a specific interest in CTE programs, only 23% of them are actually completing. I think as we look at our programs, you're going to find that there may be some things happening locally that is impacting that number. And so as you guys go through and set your own baseline for these indicators, you're going to want to look at some of that to make improvements to that number. So it may be a course offering sequence isn't quite aligned to a pathway. It may mean not very many kids have access to the advanced or the upper level course that culminates the pathway. Could be any number of things happening. But what we are seeing is that a small percentage of concentrators are actually completing. And so you'll want to be thinking about that because we already know these are kids that have an interest in CTE. So the next indicator is for program quality is workplace and college readiness indicator. This aligns to our school report card. So it has the same language as what you see in your school, and is that really what they're calling it now?
I can't remember.
They've changed the name a few times, so I can't remember if it's the school report card. But in the data gateway, under your school, where you would have found your school report card, there is a workplace and college readiness indicator, and it ties to ESSA as well. And it's part of, we're not really reporting it as a state in the same way for ESSA, but it's looking at all students who take these, including CTE students, so who are concentrators. So we can't, obviously it doesn't make sense to look at everyone. So we're looking at CTE concentrators again, who have credit, a C grade or higher in a CE, IB, or AP course, or who have passed a skill certification or third-party exam with 80% or higher. So that is set to align with what we're doing on our school report cards. Any questions on any of those? Do you want to talk about the baseline on those, Jeff? Because those are a little different how we set those. There is a question.
Daryl asks, what I mean is, where is Fox Elder District in relation to these indicators and baselines?
He's also interested in getting baseline data specifically for his district.
I'll send these out for each of your LEAs. I'll upload these to move it as well.
So we are planning to give them to you so that you can see your information locally like this.
That's the only question we have.
Does that answer your question, Daryl? Yeah, okay.
So this would be like a preliminary FALPL, which aren't called FALPLs anymore. They're called LDPLs.
Little polls.
Local
Something, we can't say that acronym.
local designated performance level.
Performance levels, yeah. So the interesting thing about how this works now is that as your recipients look at the local recipients look at this, you're going to have to set your own baseline. Yeah.
Michelle Price said she looked in the data gateway this morning and it's the old numbers and not the new ones, so that doesn't match.
What are you talking about?
What old numbers?
In
the data gateway?
Michelle says, I got my Move It file this morning, but it is sorted by the old indicator numbers, not the new ones. Will it be updated to match?
Right.
Yes,
because
we will.
The performance reports, we haven't done them for 2020 yet.
Yeah.
Right? So they're for last year, the Perkins 4 indicators. I will be sending copies of this document for your LEA out later.
Mindy with
I don't know. Well, it should be pretty quick.
Okay.
And then Mindy from Uinta would like to know if it's possible to obtain this information in an Excel format as well, because they are applying
That is Excel.
It is Excel.
Yeah, I just took a screenshot of it. You'll get it in an Excel file. It won't be a PDF file.
No.
We will give it to you in Excel file, and we won't suppress your numbers.
And will they be able to look at it as a region in addition to as a district?
So
Yes.
Yeah.
I've created those. So I've done all that for a couple of regions. I think Southwest and maybe Bridgerland. I can't remember. But I've done the region reports like this as well. So look for those.
So
They'll be in the Move It folder under regions, and whoever has a Move It account to access the regions folders will be able to get all those files.
So we're working on getting this for you. So you guys will have a couple options when you're submitting your application in a region format. You guys can, as a region, set individual goals by LEA, or you can set region goals when it comes to your core indicators. And you can also adopt the state level goals if you choose. So those are your three options. You can, when you submit your application and you're going to have these goals and your baseline information, we're going to make sure you get all of that based off these definitions. You will then have to determine how to best submit those numbers. And that's what you need. It's important that you collect feedback on that to make sure that you have support within your region and within your LEAs, that is how you're going to show your performance, how you're continuing to improve your performance. So baseline information on this was set by how? It was the way we did it previously, is that correct? So
yeah, yes, the baseline stuff was, well, it was these new definitions with the older data, right?
yes. So then in order to determine what our increase was from 2020 up through 2023, we added how much? What percentage?
1% increase.
1% increase.
Just like in Perkins
4. Yeah. So that's how we said that. We didn't really know what was realistic to do, but we followed that older sort of 1%. I would expect on some of these that we are going to see large increases after the first year or two. After some of them will take a little bit longer just because of how the pathways have changed. And then knowing that we're going to keep those pathways in place for the 4 years at least, minimum, to help keep some consistency across reporting. So any questions on how you're going to set your local levels of performance?
Nothing as of yet.
All right. So what you'll find in your new reports is we're going to have to disaggregate data by some additional categories. So you can see from the list that we have some categories that are the same, and then we added 3 new categories that have to be reported. So again, if your numbers are if the numbers across the state are very low, those will be suppressed when we submit our federal report. But locally, we will give those numbers to you. But anything we post publicly will have to be suppressed if it's below what number? 10?
10, I think they changed that to 40 a couple of years ago, but that means that most of your reports will read N less than 40. So what I did on the latest one was not suppress that, because we had so many of you asking me for what the real numbers were. Now, when I give these to you, please recognize that you have to obey the same FERPA laws that we do and not distribute them or whatever. It's just the law.
Yeah, just because it's easier to identify an individual student. And knowing, especially now, so previously, think about that most of your students, by the time you got this data, right, they had graduated. And so we were looking at students in the 12th grade, but that will not be the case anymore. These are students currently in your schools. Because we're doing it once they become a concentrator, they then fall into these most of these definitions. There's only 2, and I'll show you what those are in a minute, that are based off of completion in the 12th grade. So is there any questions about the data disaggregation? These are the special POPs that you're going to be looking at in your needs assessment as well.
This is the perfect time to ask questions.
So you can see that under Perkins 5, we don't currently have any measures that are tied to just participation in CTE programs. We have a big chunk of our indicators that are tied to concentration. And again, this is grades 9 through 12 at the time they become, in the year that they become concentrators. So most of the indicators fall under concentration. Then we have 2 indicators that are for completers. Obviously the completion and graduation requirement, right? Did I say that right? Placement. Oh, am I missing
completion?
one? And
No,
completion. There we go.
That's right.
Okay, so achievement gaps, as you guys are looking at your needs assessment, your achievement gaps, I know you guys have had lots of questions. Jeff's getting you more data, and as you're going through, we've had a lot of people ask for other kinds of things that we might be able to get them. If you have specific needs and you're not being able to get it locally, you can send us a request and we'll look at it and see if there's something we can get you to kind of help with that, or organize it maybe in a little bit different way. We've done a little bit of that for some groups. But you need to really be focusing on what are the root causes? Can you identify those root causes? Are there there's some things that you're seeing that are trends, either good things that are happening or things where one group of students is doing much better than another, and see if you can then start thinking about how to implement changes or improvements to programs to help reduce those gaps and comparing those groups.
Another thing we should mention is as we're developing, as we're moving in through Perkins 5, we would like you to send us suggestions for both the performance reports and the former FALPLs.
That's my very next slide. Good job, Jill.
Okay, so the look and feel, whatever, Talia says she likes these reports of performance because they kind of give you everything in one shot, right? We have to report out to the feds by gender and ethnicity and special populations. And then this has them stacked by year and then color coded so you can see if you have longitudinally some issues to address. Let us know if you want anything changed.
We kind of figure that at this point, it's a good time now to determine whether or not we want to continue with the same format, if we need to add some additional elements to this document, if this document it makes sense to Jeff and I and Talia because we look at it all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But if it doesn't really make sense to you, what would be more helpful? Because moving forward, we would like to show some consistency under Perkins 5 for these reports. So as these reports become public and published, we want to have the format determined prior to doing that. So any feedback, we're collecting that now, today, tomorrow, in the next couple of weeks. We're obviously not going to be able to completely redesign them until a month or two away, but we're going to be working on it. And so feedback is welcomed.
They're asking where do you want them to report?
Why don't you send?
You can send me an email.
Do you want them to send it to you, or should I have them send it to Camille?
They can send it to me.
Okay, you can send it to Jeff. Any ideas, recommendations, send it to Jeff.
And where can they get the current report?
This report is the one that you put in Move It, right?
Okay, that's 2019. I'm putting those in Move It after this meeting.
Okay.
I have a few of them up there. I think I got through to cache or something like that. I don't know.
You want to ask?
Jordan School District is asking, I have a friend, James, who wants you to remind us what the difference between a participant and a CTE student listed on the graph 2 slides back. Is this the correct slide that you're referring to, Jordan?
It should say it. So the first ring is a secondary student, a CTE student, and a participant. Oh, did I make an error on my slide? Sorry, that's my error.
That shouldn't be there.
Sorry.
We can get this corrected and an updated version will be uploaded.
I'll fix it before I publish.
The only thing I could think of is if you had some CTE students enrolled that didn't meet the 0.5 credit threshold, so 0.25 or whatever.
They didn't finish the course.
They didn't finish the course, maybe. Yeah, that's the only way you would have anything. I mean, secondary students who don't take any CTE courses, right? Which there aren't supposed to be any out there, but
we do have an additional question. It's from Rod Belknap with Weaver. Which column on the last slide contains data as students designated special education, or is this up to the local LEA to track this data?
So disabled is your special education student. It's how you submit that in your SIS system. So in the SIS system, you have a place to enter the student on an IEP, 504, etc. It goes into that category.
Is the 504 UTREX field, is that functional now, and are the LEAs using that?
My conversations with special ed are that they believe they are, but I don't know. Are you guys out there using it? Do you know?
So Rod says, so it's combined 504 and SPED.
Yeah.
Yeah,
They
disabled is,
in
yeah.
the same.
And Lynn says it is functional.
It is.
Okay.
So basically those columns are we have to identify the disaggregated categories, but then however you submit that information through your SIS system determines what number will be in there. So if your counselors or special ed teachers, whoever's creating the 504s, the IEPs, is not updating the student record, we will not know that that student belongs in a disaggregated category.
I'll check with UTREX to see if they're disaggregating yet.
Between the two.
Yeah.
Okay.
No additional questions.
No other questions? Okay. So, interesting thing about your continuous improvement cycle under Perkins 5. In the past, everything has been on a year, 12-month sort of rotation. Now, because your needs assessment is done every other year, your continuous improvement cycle is actually a 2-year cycle. So, you may find that in a year cycle, you sort of do each of these steps, but they won't be completely new going into year 2. You may be able to tweak some things as you go into year 2. So think of your continuous improvement cycle now on a 24-month or a 2-year cycle under Perkins 5, because your needs assessment will be done every 2 years.
Lynn wanted to update us that they are disaggregating the data.
Okay.
Data.
Thanks, Lynn.
Thank you.
Lynn.
So the other thing that happens with your data is we obviously do monitoring and review. It's a requirement that we have. So we do data monitoring. We pull samples from student membership, and you need to make sure you have backup. So this is also membership. Again, it's something that fulfills 2 purposes, one for Perkins and one for state funding. So we have membership reporting that we monitor and is selected based off of a number of different things. Some rotations, some risk assessment, some odd things that we're seeing in your data. And so those memberships records are pulled and asked for based off of a variety of different elements. But you need to make sure you always have backup. So if you think that you're on the rotation that we used to be on for, we'd pull membership every 4 or 5 years. It was a rotation like when we did program approvals. And that is not the case. We're not aligning. Program approval and membership monitoring will not always align. They may fall in the same year, but they do not always fall in the same year. And it may be that you get monitored multiple times sequentially because we're finding things in your data that need to be adjusted. So, and I did go, if you want time to go through to identify if things are going on in your data currently. So there have been some directors that have sat down with me or with Sarah, and we've gone through how we do monitoring and some of the things that we look for, how we look at what you're reporting in the data gateway to see if there's issues during the current year. Those things you can you can schedule some time with us, and we are happy to do that with you so that you can watch it as you go through the year and know if something's off. Typically what happens is that if you have a new data person or a new SIS system is when you're if you've gotten things kind of cleaned up, is when you typically find problems. If you know you were in a good place at one point. So just be aware that happens, and it's not just state funding that's impacted, it's also tied to our federal requirement to make sure your data is accurate. So this year, every year we give you an assignment to do a data review form. You will not have one this year.
Yay!
Yep, no data review. Hooray, hooray. But in place of that, it will actually be your comprehensive local needs assessment. So your needs assessment will fill the data review requirement, and that will happen every other year. So every other year, you will have the big needs assessment, which will be your data review process. On the odd years, we will be doing something different. And that needs assessment will be due with your local application, and it will be uploaded with your application at the time of application. So just to kind of clarify that a little bit, in the past, like over the last year when we've talked about the needs assessment, some of the information that we've shared is that you're not going to have to turn things specifically in. And what I have since been informed of as I work with our national partners at OCTAE is that as a state, we're required to have you turn something in. So what we're going to have you turn in is the worksheets for the local needs assessment that are at the end of the template, and you will turn that in with your local application.
And if I may, we actually uploaded this to the OneDrive folder that you guys should currently be in, and it's labeled Appendix X. These are the worksheets that you will be, and this is just a template right now, just a rough draft, but this is it's in there now. So you can get an idea or a feel of what you'll be required to submit in addition to the application itself.
And I'll pull it up so we can kind of talk about that. And also we will be releasing every January when we do data quality meetings, we will also be releasing the local application for that year. So you will get it much earlier in the year.
We have also uploaded draft versions of the local application for FY21. This includes both single entity districts and higher ed institutions that will be applying as a single entity, and then of course the consortium application as well. Let me reiterate though, these are draft versions. So what we want you to do is review these, become familiar with them. Of course, if you do have suggestions, you're welcome to forward them over to either myself or Wendy, and then we'll take a look at them and see if we need to make or adapt to changes. We will be issuing a much more aesthetically appeasing version of these applications. We're hoping within the next, do you want to say 2 weeks or so?
Yeah, probably
2 weeks, give or take. So this kind of gives you an idea of what you need to plan for, and then of course gives you ample opportunity to make sure that you can devote as much time to the local application and your local needs assessment as much as possible.
So this document is just a copy, basically, of what was in your template for your needs assessment. We're going to, when Camille says aesthetically pleasing, it's going to be prettier.
Yes, we're making it pretty and colorful.
And so it'll be easier for you to fill out. We're going to make it a form that is easy for you to fill out. We'll give it to you in advance so that you have the ability to fill it all out. You're not having to copy and paste later. You're not going to be submitting all of your backup. Like, I don't need meeting minutes. I don't need a list of attendees. I don't need all of that stuff. You're going to keep all of that stuff for your, for monitoring purposes. But you're not going to submit that portion to us. And if there's a question on the worksheet that you didn't ask, you don't have to ask every single question. That instruction has not changed at all. And you may have questions that you ask that are not on this list, and we'll give you a place where you can enter those. So the idea is that the worksheet is just a simple summary of what you've done. And then we will have that shows you've done your needs assessment. And then in the application, there will be a box for a little bit of a narrative that talks about sort of the result of your needs assessment and some key findings, some of those kinds of things. So don't think that the application and the elements that you have to report on are going to change again on you in a couple of weeks. They will not. No. It's just a matter of how the document works and how you can enter information. The items that are in there are the only thing we have in the application are items that are required by the federal government to be in the application. We have not added any state components to the local application. So, and again, this process is only every other year. In the odd years, so next year, your application process will be much more simple. And that document is still to be determined, but we'll release it by next January.
Absolutely. We do have a question from Jim with Grand. Will this be our combined consortium needs assessment or by district? It's a really good question.
So if you did it by district and you're going to submit it by district, you would upload multiple worksheet files. And if you did one summary as a region, then you would upload one file.
And then Rod would also like to know, Rod from Weaver would like to know if this is a template or a sample. The worksheet that Wendy has pulled up right now is actually the form that we will be using as an attachment, or the local, or the data quality, right? So this is the form itself, but it is a template too, right? This was part of the local needs assessment template that was originally issued out. So is it a template? Yes, but is this something that you'll also be required to fill out as part of your data quality? Yes. It's yes to both questions.
So in the years that you do needs assessment, you will have to submit this document, and we're going to make it as user-friendly as possible.
And that was primarily our goal when we drafted the application. We wanted to simplify the process as much as possible. So everything is very straightforward. The questions are concise, and then you are actually focusing your attention where it's needed the most, which again is the comprehensive local needs assessment.
And to be honest, with the information that you collect in your worksheet, what you'll find in the local application is that there's a corresponding question with most of these 6 elements within the needs assessment. So you'll have a question on teacher retention. You're going to have a question on your gaps and your special populations. So those questions in the local application, which we also have in the OneDrive for you, let me just go back there. So there is the needs assessment template, which is in there, and you'll see those worksheets at the end of that document. And then you'll see the local application. Open. And in that I just opened the same file.
That's the needs assessment worksheet.
Yeah, I just opened the same file. It shouldn't jump up at me. This is what I want. So what you'll find here is that as we go through, that was a little larger than I expected. There we go. So as you go through here, you'll find here's a narrative section for your needs assessment with some basic highlights. You will also have in the local application, it talks about course offerings and activities that you're doing. And then it also talks about having your collaboration with your local workforce. So this is your industry and workforce collaboration section. Here's your academic and technical targets, which is also an element within your needs assessment, professional development. So you see that these questions align with the required elements that are in your needs assessment. And so once your needs assessment is completed, what you'll find is that it should be a lot easier for you to fill out your application. Most of your work has been done, and that's why we want to release those all at the same time.
Does anyone have any questions for us regarding what we will be requiring for data quality or the applications at this time? Perfect time to ask questions. Let me reiterate that.
Or just some overall comments. Post-secondary, usually, I just have to tell you, post-secondary had all kinds of questions for us. And so it went over time. We're under time significantly. So if you do have questions or concerns about data, we'd like to take some time to chat about it today because things are final moving forward, right?
And it's moving rather quickly.
Yeah. Slow but quick.
Yes, there you have it.
Any questions? Any thoughts? Any concerns about the indicators?
Nothing.
Gosh, nothing. All right.
That's good news then, right?
I guess we could have started at 10.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I guess let them alone.
Sorry, Tim.
But I guess you can all go to Silicon Slopes now.
Yeah,
right?
there you go.
And go work on your things. Well, thank you guys for participating today. If you do later, as you're thinking about this or as you're working through things, have questions, please let us know. Jeff is working hard to get you all your reports. You should see those within just a short amount of time. I would guess in the next week or two, you'll see those. Probably before that. Yeah. But if it was me, it would be a week or two. But Jeff will get them to you earlier than that. So anyway, all right. Are we done? Anything else?
They want to know if this meeting will be posted.
Yes, we will record. It's been recorded and we will post it and make it available for everyone.
Again, last call for questions. I'm nervous that we don't have any, which is a good thing. But again, last call for questions.
You'll have questions. Yeah.
We
All
love
right.
questions.
Thank you guys for participating. Hope you guys have a great day.